testing. Meow, meow, meow. Meow, meow.
Wow, what an opening.
Stop it, stop it, stop.
Hi, we're the Reading Queens, and we're here to blab about our favorite books, why we love them, and the book boyfriends we wish were real. And we're back for another episode. Welcome. We're thrilled you're here. I'm Valia.
I'm Tess.
I'm Kristin.
I'm Alison.
Yeah, and this is our tropes episode. So you guys know I geek out over those all the time, and I'm really excited to talk about this one. But yeah, first of all, how's everybody doing today?
Very good. Loving the sunshine.
So
yeah,
wonderful.
we have sunshine here. And so I'm in England, as is maybe obvious by my accent. And whenever the sun comes out and it gets hot, and by hot, I mean like 20 centigrade, which is about like 68 Fahrenheit. So positively cold by Valia's standards. But whenever it
no,
gets
it's
hot...
like my top-notch weather. But anyway.
Okay, by Arizona standards.
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
So whenever it gets nice like this in the UK, everyone goes crazy because we're like, this is it. This might be the only week of summer we get. So,
Yeah.
So we've been like crazily putting things in the garden and trying to get everything out and going outside and spending loads of time outdoors. So it's been really nice to have some sunny weather.
Yeah, we've had sunny weather for so long.
You want some rain? Send me some rain.
Forever. You just you live in the summer.
I know.
Summer weather.
I do. I really do. But you know what? Having a pool just makes all the difference in Arizona.
Ooh.
So there is that. And my tan is coming in nicely because I actually tan really easily and nicely. So I'm very excited about that.
Nice.
It's the little things, you guys, okay? It's the little things.
That's okay. A pool is pretty cool. No one has pools here unless you're like extremely rich and can like afford to heat it all year round or to, literally only have it for like 2 weeks of the year.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've never even imagined living somewhere where I would have a pool. I grew up in Russia, so it's like that's not something anybody has.
Yeah.
We go swim in the lake, when we leave the city. But yeah, it's kind of sometimes when you think back about it, it's weird because I would have probably never driven a car when I was in Russia either because you had to be rich, and also there's public transportation coming out of everything you can think of. There's so many public transportation opportunities to I don't know, there's 5 that I can think of straight off the top of my head that was right outside my door. So it's you really don't need to, in a city and stuff, but it's just little things like that you don't never think about that now it's just part of life. It's normal stuff. Cool. Okay.
We'll accept that. Chill by the pool, top at the tan.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh,
I know.
That sounds so nice.
Right? And I've been doing dictation while I'm by the pool, so I'm still working while I'm not working.
What a great way to work.
I know, right? Anyway, Kristin, how you doing?
I'm good. We just had a flyover, some jets flew over, so it was really loud.
Oh, we didn't hear
I
anything.
tried to mute
Did you
it.
mute
I tried
yourself?
to, yeah.
Oh.
I was like, wow, it's
Good
going to
job.
be so loud. Yeah, it's unusual.
Fun stuff. So that's it. That's all we got going on.
Ooh, no, I have stuff going on. In the regular theme of things I talk about, I got a subscription to PBS Masterpiece channel or whatever, so I could watch even more Regency shows. And this all came about because I watched a show, I think it's set in the Victorian era, it was on Starz, and I already know that Starz tends to have a little bit more of the bittersweet period pieces. So I watched Death and Nightingales, and I did not like it at all. I did not like it. I was at the last episode. It's a 3-part miniseries, and at the last episode, I was like, there's another episode, right? Because that wasn't an ending. There was no ending, and I looked it up online. No, it's a 3-part miniseries. That was the ending. It was really bittersweet, I guess. I don't know. I didn't like it. I thought it was boring. And I was like, you know what I need right now? I need some feel-good period pieces in my life, and I want to watch all of them. And I had like seen an ad for another period piece that looked really good. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go, because okay, Amazon Prime already has like some pretty good ones you can watch with your Prime subscription, which I have. But like you get even more with the PBS. I love PBS Masterpiece, guys. I love it so much. So I finally subscribed to that, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna watch Death and Nightingales ever again or recommend it to anybody, but I'm gonna watch Death Comes to Pemberley.
There you go.
It was great because it had the same actor, one of the same actors that was in Death and Nightingales, but like his character was Mr. Darcy.
Yeah.
So it was great, and I liked that one. It wasn't as like romantic, quite as romantic or feel goody as like a typical Jane Austen like actual book to show adaptation, but it was enjoyable, and I was like, that's what I wanted. I wanted something a little more like that, and now I'm gonna be. I made a list. I made a physical list of all the Regency and like Victorian era feel good period pieces that I need to watch, and some ones that I'm not sure if they're gonna make me feel good, but look like they'll probably be enjoyable. So that's gonna be my life for a while now. So,
did you watch Little Dorrit?
No, but that's on my that was recommended on the like. I did a bunch of research. I'm like the best period pieces I could watch, and I wrote that.
So I watched that with my kiddo. Like, so it was like our special time together, so I sent the other kids to bed and he and I would stay up and watch that, and it was really fun for me because since we're grown-ups and we've learned a lot more about English lifestyle and history and whatnot, but it's completely foreign to him, so none of it made sense. So I would pause it like every 7 minutes and explain to him what was going on, and he put up with it. He tolerated it because he got to stay up late with me, and that was a special treat. So we would have like either ice cream or popcorn, like a snack, and it was him and I would pause every 7 minutes and explain to him old English society, and he's like, why would they do that? None of this makes sense. And I'm like, I know.
I'm intrigued. So what are you explaining to him?
Well, like you can't. So like I don't think this is a big spoiler, but one of the characters is in debtor's prison. So explaining debtor's prison and why it works that way and how it works, it doesn't make any sense, because if you put someone in prison who owes money, they can't make any money. So yeah, so it's and then also just the pure confusion about who, because they didn't have computers, and so he hired a private investigator.
I'm sorry, I love how old English is the days before computers. That makes me feel so old.
Well, like today, because he grew up with computers, right? So I'm like, today you could just look this information up online or whatever, and some of the things that Dickinson talks about are still in existence today. So paperwork and red tape that you have to go through to get government approval for things. He mocks that so heavily in the story. And it was just interesting because I was like, okay, yeah, that hasn't changed. That's the same.
Not at all.
They have like a circumlocution office, and the visuals of it are just tell you, they convey so much. So anyway, you'll have to tell me when you get to those scenes. I just loved the cinematography and how they set some of that up.
Ooh. Well, I've got a big list, but I also have a lot of determination when it comes to period pieces. So I'll probably get to that one eventually.
So Tess, which is of the ones on Amazon Prime, which is your favorite?
Oh, you put me on the spot. I'm going to have a heart attack.
Don't do that.
Oh, yeah, no, there's so many really good ones. Okay, so I really like this one that was Dr. something. Dr.
The Rope,
man, I can't look these up.
And he's the daughter. That's not really his daughter.
Yeah. Did you see that one? That one was really good. It was Dr. What is it? What's it called?
Dr. Thorne or Dr.
Thorn, yeah, I think that's what it was. That one was really cute because it had like the heartwarming romantic ending, and it has a lot of the like romance tropes that I love. I really enjoyed that one. There's also a lot of them that like I now own, so I can't remember if they're actually on like Amazon Prime or not. Because I do end up like, if I really just like enjoy it, then I just end up buying it. But there's so many good ones, and there's some good ones on there I haven't. I watched like the first episode of Victoria, but then I got like Shiny Object into something else after that. And I also like, I don't know, I was scared that one wouldn't be super romantic, but it looked, I don't know, that one might be romantic. I don't know, we'll see. I need me some romance in my period pieces.
Yeah, exactly. It's the only way to go because you already have the feels. I feel like we just associate that era with like romance, and so if you don't have it, it's like, what? I don't get it.
I associate it with romance and happy endings and like nice, comforting, comfort watching or comfort reading. And I kind of feel like that right now. But I have to say that, I wouldn't want the one, whatever it was, the one that you said, Tess, which had like that horrible ending. I'm not up for that with that particular genre. Because if I'm watching that, I want all those kind of warm, comforty, it's like a kind of comfort blanket.
Yeah, you have expectations, so you have to. They have to be met. Okay.
Yes.
I mean,
How many
probably
times
set
do we
up
have
my
to
own
say it?
expectations poorly. Just because it's Stars, and I know that Stars like. I mean, but they do a really good job with the bittersweet ones. I liked all the Philippa Gregory ones, even though I knew those ones. I know how they end. Like they're historical. Like these bad things happen to these women, and their love lives aren't always great after they have their like romance with the king or whatever. But I mean, I felt like they still did a really good job. But I mean, I even got tired of Outlander just because the subject matter gets so dark and like just depressing, and I was there for the romance and it just kept going. So I quit that one already. But yeah, I should have, watching the first episode of Death and Nightingales, I probably should have been like, okay, this one's probably not going to like somewhere really romantic, because it was very dry, pretty dark. There wasn't a lot of like lighthearted moments. But I do feel like there's a lot of really good period pieces that are set in like, maybe some darker subject matter, or like are a little bit more serious in tone but still deliver. And the one that is my favorite, which I've only been able to watch once because all of a sudden it's impossible to find and I just need to like figure out how to find it and buy it, is North and South.
Oh my gosh, that's what I was gonna say.
Yes, North and South is so good, and it used to be on I don't remember what, I think it was on Netflix.
It was on Amazon Prime for some time too, because
it was on there too for a while, and now it's like it's hard to find in the US at least. I think it's still easy to find in like the UK, but it's been like impossible to find otherwise. So I need it because I loved that one, and it had like a little bit of a like coming from watching like Emma and Pride and Prejudice, and I watched that, I was like, ooh, this one's a little more like serious in tone, but it still had that romantic
so
ending,
good.
you guys. Oh my gosh.
I've not watched North and South, so I read the book like years ago, and I liked it. I didn't love it as much. So her other book, Mary Barton, is like one of my favorite like classic novels of all time.
Okay.
But it is quite depressing, I think.
I know.
Like I can't really remember. But yeah, and side note, like I went to her house, like the author's house, so Elizabeth Gaskell, so where she used to like pen all her novels when I was in Manchester like a couple of months ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, we had an appointment at like the hospital nearby, and I was like, oh, we've got to go and see this house while we're waiting. So we kind of went for a walk, and like I stood outside it, and it was very pretty.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Anyway, that's a complete aside.
No.
But I wanted to say, so the point I wanted to make was like with historical ones, so like the Philippa Gregory ones and books that are kind of like use real life people, so like kings and queens and stuff. I really love those, but I think part of it is because I know what happens in the end. So or I will Google it to find out what happened to them, because they usually always have like a traumatic ending, like they might get beheaded or like,
oh my gosh,
know,
so much beheadings.
So many beheadings.
That was
so
a thing.
I kind of want to know that, and once I know that, then I know where the story's going, and I can just relax and enjoy it and go along for the ride.
Yeah, that's how I feel about like anything about like Henry Tudor. I love like the story of like his wives. I really liked the show The Tudors. But I'd been reading, I was like obsessed with Philippa Gregory books for a while. And so I like kind of got like a feel for what was happening, and I understood the main points of all of it. So every time I would watch a new adaptation or read another like book adaptation of like the story, I knew where it was going to end, so I could enjoy the journey and kind of appreciate the more like bittersweet, the more like darker turns that happened, because like I knew I wasn't reading a love story. So when there was romancy things happening, I was like, oh, this is nice. Can't wait to see how it ends.
Yes.
Well, I think it's like what Valia said, it's all about setting up the reader expectation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
You gotta meet those, or then it's just doesn't end well. And it's 2 weeks later and you're still thinking about it.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, we're not going to get into that conversation on this podcast. But I think that's like a really fun segue into what we're talking about, because we are talking about a different type of a world setting. I don't know. We're just going to dive into the trope talk now, because I want to talk about it. So for those of you who are new to our show, each week we pick a book with a specific trope, and then the following week we discuss it and tell you what the trope is. And so each of us read a different book, but it kind of follows the same trope, which in this case, drumroll, dun dun dun, is dying or changing world, which I wanted to just mention. It was a kind of a hard one to really pinpoint, because we confuse it with like the dystopian and the post-apocalyptic world, because there's a lot of that, right? Like those books are out, but you don't really think about like the when it's first happening and you're first seeing the world go through all the changes. So yeah, we're just going to talk about our books and how they fit into this trope, how we think they fit into this trope, and have a discussion, because why not?
That's what we're
I'm
here
excited.
to do.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
That's what we do.
Yeah. So Tess is going to start us off with her book.
Okay, well, I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and I picked this one because I really wanted to see what, like, a more fantasy take of this theme would be, because, I mean, a lot of the ones, there's so many really, like, cool, exciting ones out there, where this is, like, a trope, and a lot of it is, like, pre-apocalyptic, and I mean, I really love those in, like, film and stuff, like Maze Runner, that's, like, basically that, isn't it? Isn't that, like, would you consider that, like, a dying world? I mean, the world's like pretty.
I think that one is more
dystopian.
post. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's like it's been dying for a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, I wanted something different just because I felt like I had been exposed to the like more apocalypse or pre-apocalypse side through like film, and I thought that was fun, but I'm like, I want to see what like how fantasy handles that. So I tried this one and I didn't know that much about it, except for that there's supposedly a dying London, and I'm like, what the heck does that mean, a dying London? Okay, so but yeah, so it was pretty interesting. This story is about there are 4 Londons, and they're basically like parallel realms. They're parallel like realms. They're not all parallel reality, so it's not parallel Earth, it's different realms, but they all just so happen to have a London. That's like the one thing that all 4 realms share. And there's the gray London, which is the London that of our world basically, so it's not magical. There's no like inherent magical in Grey London. There's Red London, which has lots of magic. So magic is very common in Red London and that world. There's White London, which has been infected with like this dark magic kind of thing, which comes from Black London. Black London has already fallen to the magic. So okay. Black London is like, that one's like already dead pretty much, but its magic is, and I don't know, I feel like, I mean, this was only the first book of a series, so I'm sure that the world building is going to pick up, so I didn't quite understand quite all the details about it, but I know that the magic from Black London is infecting the other worlds. So the worlds closest to Black London in like the parallel universe thingy are getting infected first. So White London is next to Black London. That's why it's already infected. And so it does like impact the other worlds. And eventually, you know, if like magic from the Black London gets to the other Londons, it can negatively impact. And I didn't really get to see firsthand, so there was definitely some like evidence, but I feel like the story is just beginning in book 1, so I felt like, you know, I feel like it fit, but I'm wondering if it's going to fit even more, and I'll get to see a little bit more of like what the repercussions of having like a dying London that is full of magic and infects negatively. So what the story revolves around Kel, who he's basically a magician, and he can travel through the different Londons, and he ends up with an artifact from Black London, and so it is infected with that dark magic, and he, without spoiling too much, he meets a woman named Lila who's a pickpocket, and they're like, they have like a kind of a meet cute thing where she like tries to steal from him, and she ends up stealing the artifact, and like they have to then like, team up, unlikely allies, and the goal is to get it back to Black London, this artifact. But there's a whole lot of political stuff going on, and there's a lot of, magic-y things happening. So yeah, I mean, that's like basically the gist of it. I thought it was really enjoyable to see. It would be, I don't know if anyone else has read the full series in this, but yeah, I'm curious to see how much more that theme of a dying world impacts the storyline for the next few books. Which maybe I'll eventually read it. I don't know. I've got a big TBR. So I committed to the one book, and I read the one book, and I enjoyed it.
I think that's such an interesting concept. I'm just sitting here all impressed with the story concept. That's impressive.
I've been wanting to read this series for ages. It's been on my TBR for ages, and I've just started, so I'm maybe a quarter of the way through a Darker Shade of Magic. Yeah, so I haven't read the others yet, but I'm quite excited to, because I do love her writing, and I love the kind of concept of having these like parallel Londons and what that means.
Yeah,
so I'm really excited.
I really like Lila too, which is funny because I read a bunch of reviews from other readers who were like, oh, I don't like Lila, she's so unrelatable, and I don't like her. I'm like, I love her. I don't know. Maybe she's just the right kind of character that I don't know. I don't know why people didn't like her.
I think it depends if you kind of like a bit of an anti-hero or a bit of a feisty.
Yeah.
Like I can understand why you like her, because I feel like your characters that you write are maybe like a little bit similar in that style.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. They're like feisty, a little, unconventional, and like, yeah, I mean, I guess I could see if like, because I mean, it does affect the romance. It's not like super romantic, which I love my romance books, but I feel like this book just didn't really need that. And the amount of romance that they gave me was like, it was good. I liked it. It was enough. But yeah, I think people even said that she was like whiny or something. Like, I don't find her to be whiny. She's like pretty. I think she's like the opposite, and maybe I'm just remembering wrong. I feel like she's like the opposite of whiny. Like maybe she's too gung ho. I don't know. I like her. I think she's cool.
Just wait until we get to my book, and then that's a whiny character. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Kristin. Yeah. Wait, is this...
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Is that her young adult or adult series?
I think it's adult.
Okay. Because I know
because Kel's like, he's an adult, and I think Lila's not like super
she's like
young.
19.
I mean, maybe she's like 19.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Because I know she has that series, and there's another series which I think is like fully adult or something like that. Like when they were promoting it, I was confused. I think it's this series that I wasn't like, is it adult or is it not? Because I think the other one is. I don't know.
And this one's super popular with like the YA crowd, and it makes sense when I read it. It has, because it has the heist tropes, and heist tropes are, I mean, no, I guess I wouldn't say it has the heist tropes, but the characters feel, especially Lila, like she feels like she could have come out of Six of Crows.
Okay.
Like it has that, like, it's that anti-hero vibe, and so it felt like it could have fit in well with some YA stuff, but it definitely seem more adult.
I love me a heist story and some pickpockets and thieves. Like I think those stories are so fun.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so what I was thinking of with Dying World was with fantasy is we see this a lot with stories with plagues, right? So what came to my mind is Blood Oath. So I was reading it, and I noticed that she says, or the authors, so there's two authors, it's Raye Wagner and Kelly St. Clair, and right away they tell you, here's why the land's dying. And I loved this intro. Can I read it? And I'll skim some parts. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it starts out with dialogue. What's on the menu tonight, Rin? So we know the character's name right off. And then she says, I didn't acknowledge him straight away, sliding 2 hazy tankards of Dieter's brew to a couple men still too young to be enlisted. So we know right away what her name is, that there's probably a war. And then the next part is, she's like, what's on the menu? And she's like, what do you think's on the menu? That's what she says to the guy who's heckling her. And he held up his stump of an arm with a drunken grin, replied, roasted chicken, grilled mutton. A burst of uproarious laughter followed his quip. So basically, he's probably lost part of his arm in this war. And they're laughing because there's no like good food to be had. And it says chicken or mutton after 2 generations of famine. And then she calls back potato stew. And her stomach is rumbling as she's talking. So we know she's hungry. And she says, talk of meat made me ravenous, even though I ate better than most in Harvest Zone 7, thanks to my mother's green thumb. So when she says Harvest Zone 7, what do you guys think of?
Like the Hunger
Dystopian.
Games.
I think of Hunger Games. So it's got so there's a couple other things here that have a little bit of Hunger Games vibe. It is not a Hunger Games story, but Hunger Games is this post-apocalyptic type vibe, right? So they're pulling some of that in with some of the language. Okay, so then this next part, it goes right into why the world is dying. So she says, ever since the king started hunting land healers, the Phaeton, 90 years ago, the land has been dying slowly but surely. He'd hunted them because he wanted to live forever and allegedly drank their blood to do so. The Phaeton had been extinct for almost 2 decades, and the famine worsened every year without their magic. So then right here we see this is why they've died, is the king has killed the Phaeton, and the Phaeton are land healers. So without them, their land is dying. And then it goes into how the peasants work really hard to get food, but the peasants have to feed, the army and the other parts of the kingdom. And so they get what is left, which is primarily potatoes. So anyway, I thought that this was a really good intro because we get right pulled into, we get a little bit of Hunger Game vibes. We know there's a war. We know there's a king, that he's evil, and that the creatures, the magical species or people who were to heal the land, they no longer exist. And so their land is basically void of nutrients and it can't grow. So then from there, it just grows and grows and grows as far as the plot. And I feel like this book does such a good job of hooking you and pulling you right into the story, and just layering with like these more bigger and bigger and bigger problems and bigger hooks. So this first one where the world is dying, it's like right on page 2 and why. And so it's not a mystery as to why necessarily, so they can move on to bigger mysteries and bigger hooks with the story. And I just thought it was brilliantly done. And I think it's a very good example of a fantasy dying world, which is with plague. And we see plague, like I wrote plague in my book, The Lilac Plague. And then right on the nose there. And then like Fire Blood has plague in it. And I think a lot of fantasy stories will use plague to have, but for different reasons. So in this one with Blood Oath, you find out right off the bat why the land's dying. And in my story and in Fire Blood by Jeff Wheeler, those take a little bit longer for you to find out. I think you find out in mine like by the 6th chapter. And with Jeff's, I think it is probably about that same. I can't remember. Yeah, great. I love dying world plague stories, obviously.
That sounds really good. That sounded like a really good like hook. I like how there was so much information like delivered without that like old timey classic fantasy where it's like long ago there was a great threat from the evil king. Yeah, it's just like the older books were so classic when they did that. But I love seeing creative ways of reading information really quick, where it's like not
and it's
just this dry delivery. Yes. It's really clever and it sucks you into the story in like an active way. Yes. As a reader, I love that.
And the voice is really modern. It doesn't feel like high fantasy. It is a high fantasy, and it has dragons and all the things. But the voice of it feels very almost, I'm not going to say paranormal romance modern, but pretty I feel like it kind of bridges that gap.
Yeah, I think so, because that's the majority of what I read, right? Like I don't read a lot of high fantasy that's like high fantasy. And I like remember flying through that book because I think of the voice, the way it's written. It's not like bogging you down with information, which is like the way you saw, showed that perfectly with that introduction, because you see like the characters and them interacting, or the main character interacting, and have the information about the world like right off the bat without it being like Tess said, 5 pages of one sentence,
I feel like she did, or they did such a good job, because you do have to read between the lines, right? Like too young to be enlisted. He lifted his stump of an arm. So you have to read between the lines that there's a war. But even if you didn't get it, you would get it through more of the reading. Like the longer you read, the more that would become super obvious. I don't know. I just thought it was really well done.
Yeah, they do. That's like a power team. I really like those books a lot, because I thought that they did like such a good job with that.
Same. I hope they write something together again.
Yeah, me too. Also dragons. That's a good dragons book.
It is.
Does that book have some good romance? I feel like I've heard that book has good romance.
Yeah. So it was written in 2017. So it's like 4 years old now, but it's still, it was one of the indie books that I really enjoyed, that I saw cross over to the mainstream. So a lot of people who only read trad books read this book. And I think because the romance is so well done, the romantic tension is off the charts. And, you have to have a reason, like a wall, why the characters can't be together. And the walls that they throw up for these 2 characters they're really good. They're not like, oh, we can have one conversation and it will solve all our problems. They're really critical walls. And so because they care about each other, they overcome, overcome every obstacle, but then there'll be another bigger obstacle, of course. So that's keeping them apart. But yeah, it's I would say, definitely a lot of romance.
Yeah, and it's very.
Get this one up in my TBR.
Yes, definitely. And I do think that it's very believable in what they go through. Like, it's a fantastical world with fantastical problems, but you still see, like, I don't know, I guess that you can relate to the main character and to like the love story as well, which I think is like the perfect balance when it comes to fantasy books. And I think they did it really, really well with this series. So
yeah, you can
Tess,
see both sides.
You got to read it.
Okay.
So guess how long this book is?
Is it 1,000,000 pages long? Because I don't like long books.
I want Valia to guess.
Me to guess?
Yeah.
I mean, I've read it.
Like, just like guess. Like, how long do you think it would be?
Oh, like 85,000 words.
Yeah. So when I read it, because I read it so fast, I was like, oh, it's like 50, 60,000 words. No, it was like 90.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that until
That's
later.
my sweet spot.
Yeah. I didn't realize it.
That's the size of book I like.
It went, man.
But it goes really fast. Like, you don't realize it.
It goes so fast. Just be prepared to, like, if you have a couple of late nights or a long weekend, like, read it then, because you won't get a lot of sleep.
Also, you need to read book 2 right after. I felt like I waited too long. I was like angsty for like 3 weeks in between.
Yeah. Yeah. You will want to read the whole series.
I'm like so excited now.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've seen it recommended so many times, but there's like, this is a demonstration of the power of a personal recommendation by your bookish friends.
Yeah.
Because hearing you guys talk about it makes me sound like this is right up my alley.
I always tell people who want to learn to write better romance, I'm like, if you want an example of a really good romance, and they do fade to black. So there's just so in case readers want more steam, you'll be disappointed. It has really, really great romantic tension, and it has fade to black. There's really not a lot of.
I like me some fade to black.
Yeah.
I like it's all about the angst for me. I like the angst and the lead up.
Yeah,
to
there's
the fade to black
Yes.
they did that so well. Like, it's
so
so
good.
much. Yeah,
that's my favorite part of the, like, when it comes to steam, you guys. That's always my favorite part, is the angst and the tension, and all the build up.
Yeah.
When the books have a little too much of like the stuff after, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, that's enjoyable. And I know there's readers. I'm not gonna say that there's anything wrong with that. There's so many readers who want more of the after, the not so much the fade, like any of that, and that's fine. I enjoy that too. But my sweet spot, if you give me all that angst and tension and lead up, I'm gonna like that book.
Yeah, this is a good one to read and to study and be like, how did they because I've actually read this book many times, and when I was reading it again for
Ooh.
this podcast, I was like, dang, this is so good. Like, there's so many things that they did so well in the series. It's just, yeah, I hope they do another one together.
Yeah, she like takes out her notebook that's like, 50 million pages long. Let me add more notes to this.
Tell me so well.
Yeah.
I'm on the verge of like being like, hey, you guys should write something else. Don't disappoint me.
Yeah.
I'm so mean. I won't. I'll just tell them that in this podcast.
Yeah, but I also think that Raye just in general does romance really well. In like all of her books that I've read, or even like the other combination of books that didn't happen. That only the 2 books came out, which was my favorite. I thought the romance in that was really well done too. So
I think what she does really well is emotion.
yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
That's
really
probably
well.
what it is.
Yeah.
But
Dang
yes,
you,
read it.
Raye Wagner, that makes me cry.
That's such a great compliment. I want
It
people to
is.
tell me that I make them cry with my books.
Yeah.
In bad ways and good ways. Anyway. Yeah, so Tess, you can read it and report back to us.
Okay.
Sounds great. Alison, you read something that I'm really excited that you read.
And we somehow have to talk about without spoilers. So I read the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, which I was so excited to read because this is literally, the book has been on my bookshelf for I think like 3 years maybe. Like my dad read it and he's like, I think you'll really like this book. Here, have my copy. And I was like, oh yeah. And literally like it's been on my TBR every month for about the past 2 years. And I basically needed an excuse to like bump it up to the top. So this was like a perfect excuse. And
You're
I
welcome.
think thank you, Valia. But I think when I first saw the topic for this, like this trope, I really struggled because like I read a lot of dystopia and a lot of post-apoc. But I was like, is that really dying world? And I'm just going to read this like really short quote from the start of the 5th season because I think this is what describes the difference between this book and the books I was thinking of. So the quote is, when we say the world has ended, it's usually a lie because the planet is just fine. But this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends for the last time. And that's the intro. That's like the end of the prologue.
That gave me chills.
And it's, I know. And I read that. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this. and I think that's what made this book for me is it's actually dealing with the kind of like the earth itself kind of dying rather than something we as like, I don't know, in most apocalyptic things it's like a plague we've done or like an EMP or something has gone wrong or like we've nuked different countries so much that we've destroyed the world. Anyway, so it's a fantasy book. So it's set in this like land called the Stillness, and the end of the world it's talking about, or the kind of scenario I guess, is like tectonic activity. So it's like these huge volcanic eruptions. So when it talks about the 5th season, obviously you have like your normal kind of 4 seasons, but the 5th season is what happens when like you have a massive volcanic eruption, and the ash and the fallout from that volcanic eruption basically creates this blanket layer which stops the sun coming through, which destroys all the crops, and ash falls and it kills everyone, and it's like it is a different climate. It creates a whole climatic shift. And what I really love is that that has happened on this world too. We have had massive volcanic eruptions in the past. Sorry, I'm a geographer by training, so you can see why I love this book.
Yeah.
But literally, like when you look back at the history and like the eruption of, say, Krakatoa, and people literally thought the world was ending when they saw that. And for a lot of people, it did end because it caused like massive famine, and it killed so many people. So many people died of starvation. Or not just through the kind of injury and disease or whatever. So I really like the fact that it took something that does happen on Earth and it's put it in this fantasy setting. And the other thing I love, well, there's so many things I love about this book, but anyway, another thing. So it starts at the end, so that there is a bit of like shifting, without giving too many spoilers, there's a bit of shifting around in terms of timeline within the book. And actually the world building in it is so good, but it's really not upfront, and it took me quite a while to get into the book and to figure out what was going on. And it's the kind of book where I got to the end and I was like, right, I need to go back to the beginning and read it again. And actually, I'm literally looking at page 1, so like the first page of chapter 1 here, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
Like that foreshadowing that you just like glance over as you start reading through it. I'm like, oh, I can now, having been to the end and coming back to the beginning, can read so much more into that and understand it a lot more. So yeah, so it is amazing. It's obviously amazingly written. It's won loads of prizes and everything. And in terms of the actual kind of plot, so as I said, it jumps about a bit, but it deals with this kind of cataclysmic sort of eruption, sort of a combination of earthquakes, tectonic activity, breaking of the earth. So the planet is literally like breaking apart. And it starts with this lady who is an origin. So this is I guess the more fantasy element of it, is that you have these people who can actually control seismic activity. So they can create earthquakes, but they can also still them. So they can kind of help mitigate the effects, I guess, of these kind of eruptions, or they can make things worse. And so it follows kind of her story going through, which starts at, the end of the world. And this isn't a big spoiler because it's like in the first chapter. So her son has been killed and she's basically on the hunt for her husband and her daughter. And yeah, it's just brilliant. I can't really say any more without giving you spoilers, but it's really complex, and it has amazing world building, and yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's so good. One of my friends like recommended it to me so many times, and because I don't read high fantasy as a choice, I was like, okay, I'll read it one of these days. And then I ended up buddy reading it with somebody, and it was like so fun because I buddy read it with an author. And so going through, we did the same thing. We would read 3 chapters at a time, and then we would like talk about, oh, we need to go back to the very beginning, because then like we'll discover something and we're like, oh my gosh, we need to go back like 3 chapters back, 4 chapters back. There was that mention, like we were right, because we would like make guesses on what's gonna happen next and stuff. And even at the end, because it's a trilogy, even at the very end, we're like, we should read book 1 and like go over these chapters because there's like all this stuff. So it's like so well written, but it's like when you read it, you don't even like, you're amazed, but you don't even realize like the level of amazement until you're done with it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this was so brilliant. Like, how is this possible? Anyway, so I'm like really excited you read it because it's so good.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these where I actually want to dive into book 2 pretty soon. So I'm really bad for reading the first book in the series and then like moving on to something else because I have so many things like on my list to read. But I think for this one, I actually kind of want to read it again and then go into book 2 kind of straight away while it's fresh in my mind. So I kind of remember everything of what happened, because I suspect that there's like lots more kind of foreshadowing in this book, which kind of comes out in the next book, because the ending to the book is not quite clear in a sense. Although I do think I need to go back through the book to read it and it will be clearer the second time around. But I think that maybe perhaps comes out more in like the rest of the series.
Yeah, it's really good and very complex. And also I did like that how complex it was, the language of it wasn't over my head. Like sometimes when I read fantasy books, even when it's not complicated, like what's happening, the way it's written, I'm like, what? I don't understand. And then I'm like, I must be just not smart enough to read this book, you know? And I think that's why I stay away from a lot of super high fantasy books, because like the language of it, and I think we talked about this before on a podcast, the language of it is just, you know, it's too much for me to digest in the way that I like to, because I'm a fast reader and I like to get through stuff fast, you know? But with this series, I didn't feel that. There was never like a chapter where I was like, I was confused a lot, because that's just part of it, because there's so much that goes on. But the language didn't make me feel stupid about it, because it was just, you just don't have all the information. So of course you're not going to understand everything, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you about that, actually. And I like the same thing in my books. Like, I don't want the language to kind of slow down the pacing of the book for me and the kind of plot on what's happening, or, I don't want to put it down because of that. But no, it was really well written. And yeah, it wasn't like there was lots of action and there was really good description, but it was kind of interwoven so that the tension was kind of kept up. And the sort of different chapters in different voices helped as well, I think, because it kind of kept your interest and you were wondering how all the different events, because with every novel you have like all these different events in the beginning and towards the end they all kind of come together, don't they? Yeah. And you kind of figure out what's going on. So yeah, certainly during the first part I was like, okay, so where is this going and what's this doing and how does this all relate? It's so good.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've ever read by her, but I did get her newest, which is like the oh my gosh, what's the name of it? I can't think of it, but it's basically the premise, from what I remember, is that it's set in New York City and every single borough is a person, like actual person. And so it's basically about this world where cities are alive and they're represented by people. And I think if like one person dies, then a different person takes that place to become that borough in New York City. So it's like she's really good at that, like, what in the world are you talking about concept, but then puts it together in a way that it's like approachable for anybody who wants to read it. So we'll see what I think about that book, but I'm like really excited to read it and see if I have like the same emotions and responses that I did with the 5th season trilogy.
Is that one The City We Became?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I saw that one and I want to know what you think. I'm super curious.
Okay. Did you read it?
No, I almost downloaded it yesterday and I was like, stop it. Stop.
Don't do it. That's funny. Yeah, I have it. It's on my list for like this year. So since I'm slowly making my way through those 21 books, I will eventually get to it before the end of the year.
Did you see Stephanie Meyer has a new book too?
No.
Yeah, I downloaded it. I'll tell you all about it.
Okay. What is it called?
I downloaded another one. Hold on, I'll look at. I'm like, what is it called? I don't even know. Let me look at my Kindle.
Is that the first book she's written since The Host?
It's called The Chemist.
Oh, that's not new.
Oh, it isn't?
No, I
was like, ooh, it's like this thriller. I'm gonna read it.
That's been out for a while, but yes, she.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with vampires.
No, it's like.
I mean, I really like The Host, so I thought she was like, I thought she was like when she wrote The Host that she was like really progressing as like a writer and making things a little more like deep. So. Maybe I did hear about that and it's just been so long.
It's been out for a while. I'm trying to think if there's another one after The Chemist that was a follow-up, but I can't remember that for sure.
Oh, you're right. It has been out. It's been out since 2016. I don't know. I have never even heard. I was like, oh, Stephanie has a new book.
Because it has nothing to do with her genre. It's like it's completely different.
Yeah. I think it is like a contemporary.
I think it's like a
sci-fi.
Yeah, or from what I remember, I thought it was like a murder mystery, like a police procedural or something. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know, but I was like, ooh, a thriller. I'm down for that. Heist, thriller. I'm down for that.
You'll have to let us know how it is when you finish it.
I just added it, so I have like 100 other books on my TBR
for that.
Get back to us in a couple years,
right?
then.
Like, I'm like, why am I even downloading this? Download.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It was like on sale, so I was like, oh wow.
That's why, because I just saw it on sale, and I was like, yeah. That's like the most relatable part of this podcast to our listeners is the amount of books we have on our TBR.
We're like, oh
my gosh,
it's like never ending. And also like love seeing posts of people who are like, yeah, I'm reading this, and also I added a bunch of books from Reading Queen's podcast to my list. I'm like, yes, that's what we want. I know.
Join us in the never-ending TBR.
Basically.
But some people will read like a book a day, and I'm so impressed.
I'm jealous of those people.
Me too.
I don't read that fast.
No, but you still read really fast.
Yeah. I do if I'm up until like 7 a.m. and then I'm trashed the next day. I'm like, my husband will be getting up and I'm like, oh crap.
I should have slept. That's funny. I've done that. Anyway, we've all done that. So let's talk about the book I read. I'm the last one out of us four, but it's called H2O, or actually I can't remember if it's the UK. I think the UK is the rain and the US is the Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. I was like, I always confuse those two. But it's by Virginia Bergin, and it is a world where the rain can kill ya. And it does kill you. Not can. It actually does kill you. So basically, the book starts off as a premise. So it is set in our world, like, you know, the modern, no fantasy world, just regular girl going to a party in the barn in the beginning of the book. And then they're like in a hot tub and she's making out with the boy she likes. And suddenly the parents come out and are like, get inside. And, you know, the teenagers, they're all like, all right, crazy old people, what you doing? But they all go inside. And then as they're standing there, the boy that she was just making out with, Ruby, who's the main character, starts bleeding and dies because he was out in the rain. And that is the beginning of this book.
Wow, what an opening.
Just the bam, we're there.
Love interest, dead.
The world ended. So then it's 2 weeks later and Ruby is all alone, and anyone who like touches the rain, like you can't stop in any puddles, you can't wash your hands with like the running water, like anything that is the rain, you know how it goes everywhere, right? So any of that, like, you cannot use. So, you know, she has like drinkable water in bottles or something like that, and she's running out. And so she's kind of in this situation where she has to kind of hike across country to find her dad. And she doesn't know if he's alive or dead at this point. And so, yeah, it starts up really fast. It's very fast paced in the sense that we are in Ruby's head, and yeah, a lot of stuff happens and she tells you about it. And here's the thing, like I mentioned earlier, she is one annoying character.
Oh, this is the whiny character. Okay.
Yeah, so here's the thing though. She is a teenager who loves makeup and she loves high heels and she loves accessories, and that's like her whole thing. She's just this like snobby teenage girl that loves all that stuff. And then basically the world ends, right? And she's all by herself. And so I was thankful that she was still annoying, if that makes sense. Because she didn't just automatically, like, the rain starts killing people and 2 weeks later she's like this apocalypse.
Like
yeah, exactly. No, she was still like, oh, I want to really dye my hair. So she like goes on this adventure to like steal hair dye from a store because that's what she wants to do. And I felt like that made her very like relatable to that age group, because I mean, I would like to think that I would probably be a little bit more on the preservation of my life side. But at the same time, if that was my obsession before the apocalypse happened, like I can't see that changing just because I saw some dead bodies. You know what I mean? So I thought that was like, even though it made her very unlikable at times, a lot of times, it also made her very relatable to where she was as a character. And it also gave a lot of room for growth, which I think she did throughout. And so she just has to really learn what is like important in life, basically, and how to live in this world where any kind of water is dangerous. And I mean, this is to a point where if you go outside and you like brush against a car or a leaf on the tree that has the rainwater on it, like you will get sick and die. Like that's it. So
I didn't actually understand how you just don't die. Is this set where is it set? It's not set in England, is it? Because it rains all the time in England.
It like, is set in England,
you would totally
I think.
Die. I just don't understand how you cannot come into contact with rainwater like ever.
Right. So here's the thing, like when she goes out, like she puts on like a makeshift suit. Yeah, basically. And she like duct tapes things and like, you know, kind of try to don't let any kind of water into her anywhere. And you do kind of have to give way to the fact that this is a book, because I would think I would, even that protected, I would still probably come in contact with it, especially in some of the stuff that happens. And sometimes it like starts raining. I think when she goes to the store one time, it does start raining, so she has to like get into a car and stay in there for some time until it like passes, because you know it's a lot more dangerous obviously when it's raining versus when it's just on the ground. And there is a little bit of that found family aspect later on. She actually ends up like coming in contact with this boy who's like this nerdy boy from her school that she like doesn't like. And I hate the way she like treats him sometimes, because she's just like, he should just be lucky that I'm even talking to him. And I'm like, it is the end of the world. Like, get over yourself. But in the end, like they become kind of a found family. There's like another little girl that is like, I think he helps, and then they end up like all three of them going on this journey. And so it was really interesting to see a world where it's just such a small change in what we're used to, right? Because like I love rain, right? So I just want rain all the time. But I'm like, come live in Arizona, you'll be safe. Like it never rains here. No, but it was such a small thing. It wasn't like the whole earth was, you know, coming apart like in the 5th season or whatever. And it wasn't, you know, some big catastrophe that happened. It literally rains and the rain suddenly kills people. And then you have to just really learn how to live with this one small change. And it is a duology, so I've read both books, and I did kind of wish there was more at the end, because I still had some, you know, questions that I wish would have been answered. But it also is kind of interesting to see how people respond to such a small change that ends up being so catastrophic. And, you know, you have like your military and your government doing stuff, but also you see the way people respond. So I don't know, it was like a really interesting read in the sense that it was different too than what I'm used to. And also, I have to mention this, it is not based or in any way related to the Netflix show The Rain. Which when I was talking to somebody else, they're like, oh, it's like the show. I'm like, no, actually the book came out way before the show, and the show is not based on the book. So I don't know how these two completely different people had the same idea, but it happens. But I also really like the show too, because I thought that was interesting. But I think in the show, the rain eventually stops being dangerous, and in the books it doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
If I remember correctly.
Did I see both I think I only saw one season of the show, but I do remember at one point they're like, oh, look, the rain. It's not. Yeah. It's like, we can like dance and frolic in it, and I accidentally pushed you into it. Hope you don't die. Yeah. And then, but then something else bad happens, and they realize they're still in danger. Yeah,
there's like more stuff in the rain than just the rain, but in this one, that's like the villain is the rain, basically, in this one. So I
have a question. Yeah. So I'm stuck back on right when you started with this. I want to know how they get drinking water. Like if they run out of drink, are they like, you can't live very long with, you're like one small change. I'm like, wait a minute, you will die without drinking water.
And also, can I just say, if this is set in England, like we do not have like racks and racks and aisles of drinking water, bottled drinking water in our supermarkets. Like there's a little bit, but most people, like 99.9% of people, just drink tap water. So there is not a huge supply of bottled water in this world. Just for information.
Now I can't remember if it is set in England or not. I felt like it. I don't know, actually.
Even if it's not set in England, there's like people drink a lot of water.
Yes.
Like, you're gonna
but
run
you also
out
have
quick,
to like,
and then you're all gonna die,
basically. But she does have to like ration, obviously, the water too, you know. So instead of like taking big gulps, she like sips and instead, you know, of like just everything. I drink a lot of water. I drink over a gallon a day, but I would not survive very long in this world. No, but I try to remember.
Seriously, what happens when you run out of water? You cannot ration that long.
I know. I'm trying to remember if this is what happens when you finish a book in the middle of the night, then you can't remember like important parts of it. But I'm trying to remember if there's like a way that they find to purify, because I'm pretty sure the government finds a way to purify. Because I think the second book is a lot more scientific versus the first book, where it's really, really just survival story and trying to figure stuff out. The second book.
Wait, so you're saying that in this story, the government is helpful.
No, no, I'm not.
Nope. Oh, okay.
I'm definitely not saying that.
No spoilers.
This is not that kind of a
that would
fantasy
be a
world.
twist. Like if you write a story and the government's helpful, it's like the opposite of
Yeah.
Charles Dickens' circumlocution office. That would be a huge twist.
Yeah, no, I can't say that. No.
Let's note to self, let's write that. No one will expect it.
It's true.
Oh my gosh.
No, but it is, the second book is a lot more scientific in sense that they do figure out more stuff. So I feel like they find a way to purify water or something like that. Like I said, don't finish books in the middle of the night because then you can't remember anything. And I always just focus on the characters just in general because that's what pulls the story towards me. So I can tell you like what happened to Ruby and them. But all the other stuff I'm like, nah.
I had to say that when you told us about this book and like the premise of it, like I was like, wow, and I loved the premise of it. But what you're saying about the whiny character, I'm not sure I can deal with that because I get really,
You're not the only one.
whiny characters.
You are not the only one because if you look at reviews for this book, people do not like Ruby at all. And I do think that part of it too is the way she's written because we're really, really in her head. And so if you have a whiny character and then you're also like in their head at the same time, it's kind of like a double whammy. Where you're like, okay, cool, I already don't like you. And then now you're complaining about stuff that don't matter. Go away, kind of thing. So I don't know if I would recommend the book per se, just because I think you really have to be in the mood to be tolerant. But the premise really pulled me enough that I was like, I need to know what this is. And especially since I read the first book before the show came out, and so I had to reread it and I had to read second book for the podcast. So it's like kind of like it was a new premise for me at that time. And it was different enough that it made up for the annoyances that I felt towards the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I definitely
This is
want to
cool.
read it just to like find out how they survive in that world and like how they fix things, as it were.
Yeah. And you can go through it really fast. I mean, I feel like it's a super fast-paced book, and there's not like, especially in the first book, there's not a lot of like that scientific inside, all that stuff. Like all of that comes in the second book. So the first book is like super fast. So
we have all the dying worlds, water, basically water contamination, earthquakes, and the ash, like dinosaur death, right? And then plague. And then with Tess's, it was dark magic infected the city and crumbled it.
Yeah, it is interesting because it just can go out so many ways.
It really can.
Yeah, so many ways. So I think we should talk about some other books we were going to mention in this for people who love this trope and want more of it. We're going to have some recommendations. Tess, you had a book that you wanted to recommend.
Yeah, for the I have another fantasy dying world book, and that is Imitating a Fae Queen by Joanna Reeder. And this one is it's kind of similar where like it's the fairy world is dying, so it's not like our world, but it's kind of like a darker shade of magic where it's like another realm. But yeah, the fairy world is dying, and that's impacting the world, and it's impacting the people and magic. So yeah, I think that one's a really good one if you want more of the fantasy aspect. It's not like that's not like what the whole story hinges on. That one's definitely like very character focused and relationship focused. It's not like it's not like this racing against time, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. It doesn't have those like pre-apocalyptic fast-paced vibes about the dying world. There's so much more going on, and I really enjoyed it. It's if you like, it's a really good mix between, let's say, the Iron King and the Vampire Diaries.
Yes,
that's like the feels that it gives me.
That's a perfect description.
Yeah, so if that's your jam, you'll like it. I really like that one. I read the first one and the second one. And there's also like a prequel floating around. I'm not sure if she still gives that one out. I'm not sure where that one is anymore. But yeah, it's a good series.
It is. Kristin, you had some books. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was just thinking the one I'm recommending is somewhat similar to Joanna Reeder's in that the Fae realm is is the one that's dying,
Mhm.
but it's kind of bleeding out through like this in-between world. And I think it might affect the mortal realm. But again, it's the same thing where the story, it's a character-driven story. It's a romance with the backdrop of the dying world. And that's the reason why the main character is spurred to help, because she wants to, save their people. Okay, so that one is Deal with an Elf King by Elise Kova. And again, yeah, kind of in the same Fae vibe.
Lots of romance feels.
Yeah.
Lots
Yeah,
of,
this one
lots
is
of
a romance. I
romance.
would say it is a romance
Yes.
in a fantasy
Mhm.
setting.
Yeah, it's definitely more fantasy romance than like romantic fantasy. It's if you like if you want a romance plot, it's got a romance plot.
Yeah, and it has a little bit of like Hades and
Ooh,
Persephone
yeah, it does.
vibes.
Yep.
So that was a little bit different, but I really liked that. Okay, so then, and the other one, I have a second one, and this one is sci-fi, and this one is basically you're watching the world die, and the people are trying to stop it from dying, and that one is called Survivors Club by M.K. Martin. She is my editor for my stories. And I have read this book. She's very intelligent, and it's a smart read. So, and also, she was in the military, and she's just seen a lot of darkness, and so this isn't like a light fun read. It's got a lot of dark. It's like dark sci-fi, and but I would say definitely dark. And you're watching the world die. The characters are amazing. Yeah, I would say, and one little thing. So it was published by a small print publisher, and one of her characters' name is John Courage, and he is like the military guy in the story.
Okay.
And her editor was like, "You have to change his name. Like, you can't have John Courage be your military guy. Like, that's too on the nose." And she's like, "But I actually met a Courage in the military, and it's like I wanted some of his vibes." And I was like, "Please don't change his name. Like, I love that his name is John Courage." And it might be, she probably would have done it anyway, but I was very insistent that she keep it in because I just love that character name. So anyway, there is a John Courage, and he is not too on the nose. It is the perfect name. Okay.
That's great.
So anyway, that's it.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. Alison, what about you?
So I'd like to recommend Rising Storm by Kyla Stone, which is, I guess it's an apocalyptic thriller. So it's not fantasy, it's kind of straight up kind of apocalyptic post-apoc. And it doesn't deal a huge amount with the kind of what's happening in the external world aspect. There is like a virus, pandemic thing going on, but all the action in the book is centered on this cruise ship, which is taken over by terrorists. And it all does link into the whole dying earth, bad stuff that's going on. But it's very much kind of a thriller first and foremost. And I think it's got maybe 4 point of view characters. It's young adult. It's really fast paced. Really good, fun read.
That sounds fun. Yeah, if you guys ever want to check out any of these books that we're talking about, we do have a bookshop page that links all of them under the title for the episode. So they're easy to find. And we'll link, I'll leave a link in the description and like the show notes and on the website. So there's on the Instagram at Reading Queen Spot. There's so many places for you to find these links. And we make it as easy as possible because we do want you guys to read these books with us and come talk to us about them because they're just so fun, and these tropes are so fun, and just to discuss them from like a different point of view, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. I just love it. I love our trope conversations. As you guys know, I say it every single episode. I get really excited about it. But next week, Tess will be back, actually, but we'll be joined by Joanna and Clary, and Alison and Kristin are leaving us, but they'll be back in no time. Soon, very soon. Yeah, so before we go, we just want to talk about what we're reading next. So let's just go around the room. And Tess, what is on your TBR for this week?
So I'm currently reading Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. I've been slowly making my way through the Throne of Glass series. I finally finished Court of Silver Flame, so I'm feeling like I'm making my way through her books. But I don't remember if I've mentioned this before, but I've come to peace with the fact that I don't do well with long books unless I take a break. So knowing that I'm allowed to take a break in the middle of this book, which it's pretty long. I think it's in like the 600s. I'm like reading it faster than I think I've read her other books, but I also think I might just like this book better than I've liked the rest of the series.
I love that book.
I mean, really? Oh, that's good
so
to
I
know.
haven't actually finished the series. I think I still have maybe books. How many books is it? I have 1 or 2 books left to read, but of the ones I have read, that one is my favorite.
Oh, that makes me happy because so far I'm like flying through it, and I really like. I've liked all the books, but like I said, I've had to take breaks because maybe I just need. It's just I don't know. I just need to. But so far this one, I'm like flying through it, and the pacing is really good, and yeah,
nice.
That's what I'm reading.
Sweet, Kristin. What about you?
I just finished An Enchantment of Raven.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
And it's a beautiful book, and I'm kind of trying to pick a book, so I don't know what I'm going to read next. I'm
in between books.
So I'm looking at my TBR and I'm like, ooh. I'm a mood reader, so I'm just gonna have to figure out what I'm in the mood for. I think I might be, since I just downloaded Stephanie's book, I think I might be in the mood for something thriller-y and fast. So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm looking through it because I also have The Shadow Between Us.
Oh, I love that one. Oh my gosh, one of my favorites.
Yeah, so that one, I just have, I get anxiety looking at my list. I'm like, which one should I pick? Which baby?
Right.
So I don't know.
That's funny. Alison, what about you?
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm reading A Darker Shade of Magic by V. Schwab on ebook. Yay. And on audio, I am listening to Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo.
Ooh, that one sounds good.
Nice. Yeah, it is. I'm enjoying it, but like the protagonist at the moment, like, is just not very likable. Like, neither of them are particularly likable, which I think is maybe part of like the vibes of the story and like how it's supposed to go. But yeah, I found it a little hard to kind of really engage with them for that reason. But we'll see. I'm still like, I think I'm only about a third of the way through. So plenty of action still to come.
Nice. I think I'm going to read The Blade of Secrets next. I actually just
is that another Trisha Levenseller?
Yes. I just bought it, so it came in the mail, and I'm like, I think I'm just gonna skip over my TBR and just read this because it sounds.
I want you to read that one so you can tell me if I should read it. I haven't read, so I obviously, as I freaked out a second ago, I loved Shadows Between Us, and I haven't read any of her other books. They're all like on my TBR, but like I get like the analysis paralysis. I'm like, do I read that next or do I read that next? But like just because this one's new, I'm like tempted to read it like very soon.
Right.
So you'll have to tell me how good it is.
I will have to tell you because that's my whole thing with her too. Is just like I've been wanting to read her the Pirate series for so long, and I'm like, oh no, it's okay. But then this came out, and I'm like, wait, I think I want to read it now. So yeah, I'll read it and I'll let you know what I think about it. But yeah. Nice. Thank you so much for listening to the Reading Queens. Before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And then stay tuned for next week. Happy reading. Bye.
Bye.